Hello there, viewers both foreign and domestic. Every nation has its spirits, its ghouls, and its ghosts, but each place has its own spin on the paranormal. There are Native American spirits that take on various terrifying shapes and forms. There are the night marchers of ancient Hawaii, who are as deadly as they've ever been. And then there are those pale-skinned, dark-haired ghosts in Japan that haunt our dreams as well as our TV screens. Tonight, I've got an especially fun and creepy story titled, I Worked Night Shift in Japan and I Saw Something Disturbing. This is a ghost story that might keep you up for the next several nights to come. Enjoy, and remember, share your stories with us at darkstories.org or reddit.com/r/darknessprevails if you want your story narrated. Also, I'll be back to doing my usual multiple story videos soon, so don't worry. Now, let's begin. I grew up in Fujinomiya, Japan. My mom was American and dad was Japanese. It's a really nice place to live and grow up in. We also get a lot of tourism thanks to Sengen Shrine and Mount Fuji. Now, onto my story. My first job was working night shift at a konbini, or convenience store. From there on, my sleep cycle was ruined. I worked night shift there for so long it became typical of me to work night shift jobs. I tried a couple of times to adjust to a normal day-night cycle, but it seemed impossible for me. But this story is about my experience working at that convenience store. Working nights at a konbini can be lonely. Most of my time was spent alone there. My manager didn't like to work nights, and he trusted me in the store alone. I figured it was a good idea to be on his good side and not complain about it. Maybe one day he would trust me to be a manager. As you would expect, working nights can be really slow. In fact, the average night was really slow. And when things are really slow, you end up finding things to do for yourself. I spent a lot of time daydreaming. I did have a bit of a fear of being robbed, and I often wondered how I would react if someone came in and tried to rob the place. I would hope that I would react calmly and just give them the money or whatever they wanted so they would leave. Obviously, my fears back then were realistic, right? I never even once wondered if the place was haunted or possessed. But these fears of being robbed never became more than daydreams, because it just never happened. The people that came through that place at night fit into one of three categories. There were the career folk coming home late that needed a quick snack or pick-me-up. There were the hikikomori, which I think most closely translates to shut-in, young people who despise other people or hate society. They try to stay inside all day. But I would see them come out at night when everyone else was in bed, coming in for some udon or ramen. And thirdly, there would be groups of teenagers, delinquents that should probably be in bed at the time, but would rather make a bit too much noise in the store than leave without buying anything. Basically, none of these three groups fit the mold for criminals, so it wasn't real people that I had to worry about. After a time, I felt comfortable working the nights, until it started. One night, it was especially slow and quiet. It was winter, colder than usual. People were staying home enjoying a good night's rest or tea or video games, all of which sounded heavenly to me. A couple of hours had passed and not a single customer had come in. After washing the same counter space 3 times over, then double-checking the shelves to make sure everything was stocked, I ran out of things to do and I was very bored. I could not afford a cell phone at the time, so to pass the time I started reading a shonen magazine. You can mock me all you want, but I was really into One Piece at the time. It's kinda crazy how that series is still going on after so long. Anyway, I was flipping through the pages for another 15 minutes or so. Then the sliding door to the store opened. Instinctively, I looked up. I saw an extremely attractive woman. She had just walked in. She had straight, dark hair, pale skin, and light pink lips. She was maybe 160 centimeters tall. I think that's about 5'3". She seemed quite shy. When she entered the store, she kind of half grinned in my direction with a quick glance. Then she walked to the back of the store, toward the beverages. Seeing such a cute girl, I got kind of nervous. I was 17 years old at the time, and I'd never had a girlfriend, let alone touched a girl. I tried to keep my cool and figured the best thing to do would be to distract myself until she came up to purchase something. So I picked the magazine back up and continued to read it. All the while, I couldn't actually take in what I was reading, as I knew she would be approaching the register soon. Then the sliding door opened again. I thought immediately, wow, 2 customers within a minute of each other after such a slow night. That was unusual, but maybe they knew each other. I looked up, and my eyes went wide. Entering the store was the same girl. She gave the same quick glance and the same half smile in my direction. The only difference was a slight gray color under her eyes. She then also walked toward the back of the store as well, where I saw that the original girl was gone. I scanned the entire room, but no one else was there. I started to rub my eyes, thinking that maybe I just didn't see her walk out before. Maybe she had just come back in for whatever reason. A few seconds later, one of the lights toward the back of the store began to go out. I went into the back room to grab a new fluorescent bulb, and when I came back to the front of the store, the light was just fine, but that second girl was gone. I lay the unopened box with the light against the counter away from my walking path. I'd probably need it later in the night if that light was going to go out. A few moments after that, the door opened again. I couldn't breathe when I looked, and there she was once more. The exact same girl, the exact same glance given to me, with the exact same half smile. The bags around her eyes were darker now. Her lips appeared cracked and irritated. Even her hair appeared more greasy and unkempt. She turned and began to walk to the back of the store again. I walked away from the register and past the door. I was worried for my own sake and for hers. Something was wrong with this girl, and she might need some help. I began to stutter out an "Excuse me, miss," when I realized the moment I spoke at all was a huge mistake. The girl stopped, her back turned toward me. I stayed quiet. Then the lights in the room all went out at once, for a little under a second. When they came back on, the girl in front of me was completely gone. I was dumbfounded. This had took a turn into the uncanny, the not normal. But then the sliding door opened from behind me. I was terrified, too scared to turn and look to see who was there. I could hear someone breathing. The sliding door opened again, then closed, then opened, then closed, several more times just like that, before finally stopping. I could hear a dozen different sources of breathing behind me now, a dozen different people behind me breathing slowly, deeply, in a quiet store. I swallowed and gathered my courage. Then, when I was ready, I turned in an instant. Now facing the entrance, I saw that there was no one else there. I remained the only person in the store. That was the end of the strange things for that night, but something else did happen a few nights after. I was sweeping the floors that night. It was close to the time the morning guy would be coming in with the manager. It was still fully dark out, but I'd seen a few people walking past to get to their jobs. Usually a couple of people would walk in for some quick breakfast or an energy drink, but the store was empty once again, and I was finishing up my duty to sweep. I was backing up with my finished mound of debris, which consisted of grass and dust and such. I was bringing the pile to the front of the store carefully, as it would be much easier to pick up there. That's when I bumped into someone. Now, no one had come in for a while. I would have heard them walk in if they had, and I had been alone for the last 45 minutes for sure. It was weird, but I didn't realize it. Instead, I was on autopilot. I quickly turned to give a quick bow and to apologize to the person I bumped into. But when I turned around, I was met with the face of the girl from that night, and she was looking worse than ever. Her eyes were bloodshot, hair was a mess and no longer straight. There were cuts all over her cheeks going downward, and I noticed that her fingernails were broken and bloodied. It looked as if she had been scraping her own face with her nails. Her dried lips were now cracked and bleeding in places. I couldn't speak. She was looking down at the floor as I stood there motionless and horrified. I prayed that she didn't bring those eyes up to look at me. She didn't, but instead she whispered something. "Sumimasen." Then the lights flickered like before, and she was gone in an instant. If you don't know, sumimasen means excuse me, or pardon me. If I wasn't sure before that something wicked was going on with this place, I was sure then. Then things died down for an entire year. It was winter again, and I'd taken a job offer for a just-out-of-town factory that would pay me far more for my time. It would be a train ride away, sure, but I'd be in a far better situation. I'd given my notice to the manager, so I was on my last month of work at the convenience store. I was more nervous than excited. Honestly, I'm not the type of person that handles change well, and this was going to be quite a big change for me. It was the best move, I think. The store was seeing less and less business over the past year. We had some competitors rising up around the city, and staying afloat was more than difficult for us. That translated to less business for us overall. My boring nights became even more dull. Those experiences I'd had the year prior had become nothing more than a ghost story I shared with my family and a few close friends I had. They readily believed my story, too. The locals where I grew up often took a discussion of ghosts, legends, and myths quite seriously. My parents simply reminded me that if there is a ghost in the store, respect it, and don't let it be the reason I quit my job. Well, I was working one new moon night. It was so dark out you couldn't see outside the entryway door, except for a spot from the distant lone street lamp. I was stocking bottles and jugs of tea from the back room, sliding those items into the coolers. When I was alone in the store and I had to work from the back room, I would usually do it quickly, so as to get back to the front to monitor the store in case someone walked in. But restocking the coolers meant I could slow down. You see, I had a good view of the store through the shelves, so I was just taking my time. As I approached the bottom rows of the coolers, I had to crouch down, and in that stance my legs grew tired quickly. So at one point, while grabbing another bottle and reaching into the cooler, I tried to situate myself into a more comfortable position. Just for a moment, I was looking away from the cooler, when suddenly, the bottle fell onto its side in the cooler, no longer in my hand, because my knuckles had collided with something inside, something colder than the cooler itself, moist and soft. The moment I looked up, my heart began to beat so hard, it felt like my ribcage was going to burst. I wanted to yank my hand away, but I was too scared of what would happen. Instead, I left my hand where it was, and I stared back. Because what my fist had collided with was the back of someone's throat. Someone with absolutely no body heat at all. And I did recognize that face, the face of the person whose mouth I had intruded into. It was the girl from last year, that phantom girl who had appeared and disappeared repeatedly and terrified me for so long. She was sprawled on the floor with her face shoved into the cooler from the other side, mouth unhinged in an inhuman way, so that my hand could fit inside her mouth with ease. I could not move. I couldn't think. But I finally managed to react to this entity at long last. I screamed. I screamed so loud that even she was affected by it. She winced and crawled backward, fading out of existence rather than instantly, compared to before. Gaining control of my body again, I began to kick at the cooler, pulling myself backward until I hit the back wall of the store. There I lay, staring through the second-to-last half-empty shelf in the cooler, waiting for something to move on the other side, waiting to see that demon of a girl crawling across the floor between the aisles in the front of the store. Truthfully, I stayed like that for about an hour. Thankfully, no customers entered the store during that period, while I was trying my best to regain my sanity. When I finally felt sane enough to lift myself from the floor and walk back to the front of the store, I did so shaking from head to toe. I peered around the corner first, checking everything within view. No one. It was clear. Then I ran for the phone on the counter and swallowed deep. I dialed my manager's number, who would be coming to work in a few hours, so I was sure he'd be angry and half asleep. After he answered, and I apologized repeatedly about a dozen times, I made my request. I could not wait another 2 hours for the morning crew to arrive, so I asked that someone relieve me immediately. I wasn't really able to say more than I was scared for my own safety, which was just enough to get him to cooperate. In about 10 minutes, an extra tired crew member took my place. I bowed and apologized, then left for home as quickly as I could. The walk home was dark and terrifying. I found myself checking every street that I walked past. When I actually did see the silhouette of another person, I nearly yelped, as my mind was inserting the face of that girl on them. But I quickly realized I was just crazy, just scared. When I made it home, I spent the remainder of the morning with my parents, before they had to leave for work. They found my sudden need to be around them a bit irritating, but I was so scared of being alone at the time that I couldn't help it. When they left me alone, I kept every light in our apartment on. I washed my hands, then took a long hot bath. After all that, I still felt violated, dirty, fearing for my own life. But nothing else happened. The next month passed by slowly, and I transitioned into my new job, now excited rather than nervous. To this day, I never did find out who that girl was, let alone what she was. I never asked if a girl had died at that store. I was aware of the superstitious beliefs of the people around me, but before this, I never took it to heart. Never once did I think that I had experienced something like this myself. But I have a whole new fear for the paranormal. And to think after that second experience, where I heard her say, "Excuse me," I thought she was a nice spirit. But after nearly having my arm devoured by her, I don't think her intentions were quite kind.